Hi, this is Dr. Clayton. Thank you for joining us on episode 11 of Hypnosis Chat. And today I've got what I think is a really interesting topic. Your brain has to be able to process and categorize information a certain way. It can't obviously use a filing cabinet like we can physically. So your brain has to be able to store information in such a way that it can identify it later. For example, time. How do you know that if you think of a memory, how do you know what happened in the past? You can sort of see the image in your mind. So how do you know that happened in the past? And you can't use the answer because I remember it. Like, how do you know? How do you know it's not a future?
Well, aren't all memories from the past?
Yeah,
you can't memorize something from the future, right?
That's right. Memories are definitely from the past. So if you think of a memory, if you think of an image, how do you know if it's from the past or the future?
Does it have something to do with your senses?
Yes, it does.
I didn't know that previous to this conversation.
Oh no, she has no idea what we're talking about. So if you think of a plan for the future, I'm going to do this thing tomorrow, and you get that image in your mind, and then you remember that image later. How do you know that was referring to the future? How do you know that wasn't something that already happened to you? Like if you make up something that is going to happen in the future, like pretend like you're going to do something tomorrow, and now just get that image. How do you know that's something for the future? How do you know it's not something from the past? And it's hard.
I am not sure.
Right,
I can say it's completely unrealistic for what I was just thinking about. I don't know what you guys think.
Okay, so here's what we'll do. So your brain has to code that in some way. And we're going to talk today about how that happens and how you can use it to help you in various things. So everyone think of something that happened about 5 years ago, like something that happened in definitely the past. You got something like that?
Okay.
Okay, you got a memory from 5-ish years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so now I want you to see that. Can you see that in your mind?
Yes.
Okay. Now what I want you to do is see it in your mind, and I want you to point to where it is using your real finger. Is it left, right, up, down? Point to the memory.
Point to the memory.
So see that image in your mind and point to where it shows up in your visual field. Great, over here. Okay, good. Now here's the interesting part. And of course, you can be doing this at home too. Now I want you to think of a plan that you have for the future. Okay, got something for the future, like 5 years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Got that? Okay, now point to that one. Okay, now notice you pointed to a different place. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. You wouldn't normally think that your memories or plans are, in a certain place, but they are. Notice also, and Anjali, we've never talked about this before, right? And Anjali has a standard timeline, and it's good to have a standard one because I think the standard one is the most useful most of the time. And by standard, I mean her past is off to the left, and her future is off to the right. Now, most people also find that to be the case. Sometimes people have, like the second most common one is like the future being in front of you and the past being behind you. And there's so many interesting things about how that affects your life. How you unconsciously think about time affects your life. For example, there's lots of examples, but I'll just give you this example. So for Anjali, notice how her past, point to the past again.
It was
okay, and actually it wasn't there. It was here.
Well, it was almost forward. I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
No, that's okay. And the reason is it was close. It was 5 years ago. Was close to the left, and the future was way over there. So what that means, I would predict that a person with that kind of timeline would find it easier to remember things that happened 5 years ago than to plan for 5 years in the future. And that person might be a more past-oriented person because it's easier for them to access memories from the past. Would you say that that's true?
Yes.
I know it's a broad, sweeping statement, but generally, if your past is like right here, it's kind of still in front of you and it still gets your attention and it's easy to access. Whereas the future, if it's way over there, then that's, you can think about it, but it's going to be harder and less natural to think about it that way. So that's number one. So a couple of important things. How you view time is completely unconscious. Most people have no idea how they process time. And number two, how you process time affects your life in very subtle and powerful ways. For example, whether you're likely to be a past-oriented or future-oriented person. Someone who is past-oriented will tend to, they might find it more difficult to, make plans for the future, or they might remember things more easily. Those are very common effects of being past-oriented. So if you say, oh, what was that thing that happened 2 years ago? Anjali might be able to remember it very easily. And then she might or might not have difficulty planning things for the future. Whereas someone who's future-oriented, like where the future is very visible in their mind, and again, this is all completely unconscious. No one does this on purpose, or a very tiny percentage of people do this on purpose. And then the past might be far off to the left. Then that person might be very comfortable making plans for the future, but it might be more difficult to remember things. So if you ask them what they did yesterday, they might not remember.
Can you use, what is the most common, are most people past-oriented? Or most people
that is another good question. That is a good question. In my experience, I've found that it's probably average, probably split 50-50.
Okay.
Now, okay, so here's what we got so far. We all have a timeline. It's unconscious. It affects our life in profound ways. There's still a couple more interesting things to come. So we've got this idea that, if your past is harder to see or easier to see, you will tend to be more or less past oriented versus future oriented. Now, so say for a second, let's take the second most common setup, where the past is actually behind you and the future is actually in front. That would be someone who's very future oriented. They can't even see the past anymore. It's like it's completely gone. So if you ever meet someone who just has no concept of the past whatsoever, and you don't know why, we tend to just kind of write that off as, oh, well, that's just that person, or that's just, that person's personality or whatever. But really, there's a reason for everything. Every single thing that people do, there's always a reason for it. And it usually has to do with how they think about something. So if the past is way back here and they can't see it, and the future is in front, they might just be that sort of person that just goes and maybe is even too reckless. Not that's having the future in front of you is necessarily bad, but one thing that might happen is they might be too reckless, or they might be a great visionary. So how you see the past and the future greatly affect how your a lot of different things about your personality and your memory. So okay, so everything good so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so so here's the next half of this. The next half of this is you aren't stuck with your timeline. Just like every other thing in your mind, you can change your timeline. You can make it different, and you can make it different for one thing. Like you could change the default way that you think about time, or you can have this special way of thinking about time that you use in certain situations. So let's say, for example, let's do this. We're going to play with your timeline a little bit. Okay. All right. So you've got your timeline where I said the thing that 5 years is in the past was like right here, and the thing that was 5 years in the future was way over here. So do you remember that? Okay. And do you get the sense that when you have a timeline like that, do you get the sense that the 5 years in the future is much farther away than 5 years in the past?
Yes.
Isn't that kind of funny? Of course it's 5 years, but you have the sense that it's 5 years. So let's just experiment. And of course, at home, you're more than welcome to do this also. All right, so here's what we're going to do, just for fun. We can always change it back. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, and I just want you to pay attention to how you feel about this. Okay, so you've got a certain feeling with the 5 years here and the 5 years in the future here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do this. Okay? So the 5 years in the past is way over there now.
5 years in the future
is
becomes
right
present.
There. Yeah, exactly. It becomes the present or close to the present. So how does that make you feel? Just any answer is okay.
Time moves very quickly.
Okay. So it gives you a sense that time moves very quickly. It's like it's right there. 5 years in the future is right there. So so it might give you motivation to work on things for the future. Like some people, not Anjali, but some people don't have enough motivation to work on things in the future. That could help with that. It could let you see the things in the future more clearly, perhaps. Okay, so there's different advantages and disadvantages to every style of thinking, as long as you can control them. Even the one where the future is in front of you and the past is behind you is useful in certain situations. Like, let's just say that your task is you're going to open a business, and your task is to come up with a 5-year plan. It would be useful to be able to see the past in front of you, or maybe even, the close-up one. So how you see it is useful in different situations. Or let's say that you are going to, you're going to a family reunion and you want to be able to remember everyone. Moving the past up toward the present could be useful. Oh, remember that time, blah, blah, blah. It's easier to see. The information is still there. It's just the way you're automatically presenting it to yourself makes it easier or harder to access that information. So even someone who doesn't have a good memory can take something from the past and move it up, and suddenly they can remember all those things.
I have a question.
Please.
Does the way is the direction of where you look at the past here or there dependent on age? Because I've noticed that as I've gotten older, I notice that I'm a little bit more, I think
More
that I'm a little
past-oriented?
bit, well, yeah, I'm more that and future. Actually, I was going to say future oriented.
And you could, and now that's totally possible. How can I be both more past and more future oriented?
Yeah,
You could, let's say you take both past and future, and let's say you move them both to the present.
Yeah.
See, that's a different feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is so interesting. You should, if you're not doing this at home, you should definitely try it. And then, so take the things and move them in close. So 5 years and 5 years is just right here. Or 5 years and 5 years are both out there. And all you have now is the present. Interesting, isn't it?
Another fork in the road.
Yes, it feels different, and it leads to different responses and different resources. So if you want, what's the thing that happened 5 years ago? A lot of times what people do is it's over there, and they're like, I don't remember. And they're trying to remember, but it's like they're trying to remember it from all the way over there. Mm-hmm. When in fact, if they just took it and moved it up here and expanded it, suddenly the information is much easier to access. So that's something that you should definitely try and experiment with. Same thing with the future. I can't really think that far ahead. Take that thing and move it here, expand it, and move it like right here. So that 5-year plan is just right here. Year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you can see the whole thing. Make sense? It's like your brain is trained to notice when something's right here, it's in the present. And so it's something that you focus on. So when you move this closer to the present, if someone's good at the present but not good at the future, if they do that, it makes it more present-like, and they could use the tools they already have to think about the future. That's one way of explaining it. Okay. To
add more tomatoes on the sandwich. Do type A personalities usually think more future-oriented, or?
That's a good question. And actually, I didn't answer your other question either. I just remembered. So the age question, I would say age doesn't directly affect it. It's not like as you get older, it always does one thing or the other, but certainly you can change over time. We naturally grow and change over time. So it could be that you become more past and or future oriented as you get older. And what was the second question again?
Personality types.
Personality types.
Does that even relate to what we're talking about?
I would actually say that your timeline creates your personality type.
Oh.
Yeah. I would say the timeline is more fundamental than, you see, personality type is just a set of behaviors. It's not something that's about you. It's an effect of how you think. Thinking is always number one. And when you talk about type A and type B, you're usually talking about feelings.
Okay.
Like whether people feel pressed to do something or they feel like not pressed enough to do something. And feelings always come from thoughts. So, and the timeline stuff we're talking about is definitely in the thinking category. So I would say that a good question for me would be, if someone is a type A personality, what type of timeline do they usually have? And we could probably answer that question ourselves. Do you remember how when we took the 5-year thing and moved it here, suddenly it was like maybe more motivation to do that? Maybe it's like, it's right on top of us. We have to do it now. And you could see how that could foster a type A personality.
This can get really intricate. You could do like whole social experiments about different classes of people, different races, and how they view things. This is very interesting.
It's very interesting. And the really interesting thing, it affects so many different things. And and remember, we're only talking about how your brain perceives time. That's it.
Yeah.
Just time. We're not talking about relationships. We're not talking about anything that, like any other categories that could be equally complex. So the one, if you gain nothing else from this, I want you to gain that whatever you do or feel, if you don't want to do or feel that way, there's a reason it's happening, and it has to do with your thinking, and you can change it. That is the message that I want to get across. Even if there's no conceivable explanation for what you or someone else does, there's always an explanation, and it always has to do with how you think about something, whether it's time or anything else. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about really how you affect time can affect any kind of issue. So let's talk about something like anxiety. Let's talk about anxiety for, let's say, just because I've got Anjali here, let's just say that there's anxiety for like a performance coming up. Okay, so let's just experiment and play with the idea of timeline to see how that can address that issue. So let's see, think back to a time when you had anxiety about a performance, and it could have been years ago, could have been recently. Can you think of a time?
Yes.
Okay. So getting into the moment. So where do you see the performance on your timeline? Point to it. Okay, so it's like over here. Okay, and you feel anxiety about it?
I actually try not to feel anxious about the past nowadays. But,
Okay.
It's more anxious if I point there. It's more anxious for something I can't see. It's like a thing where it's like behind me.
Another super interesting thing. So if it's behind you, have you ever thought about that behind you?
Yes.
What is behind you? What's behind you? What things are behind you? Things, is it past or future, or is it, okay? See that, so that probably has nothing to do with time.
No, maybe not.
Things that are sneaking up on you and daunting you.
Maybe.
No, and that's fine. We could totally talk about that. So really the main topic for today is how your brain categorizes information, how it tags information. How does it know that how do you know you're supposed to feel daunted about that? Oh, well, it's behind me. Is it big and behind you? Or how big is it behind you?
It's not so big. It's just basically a shadow.
There's a shadow behind you.
If we're getting into details like that.
We are getting into details like that. So, and it's daunting, and it's a shadow. Is it your size? Is it smaller?
Surprisingly, it's my size or smaller.
Okay. All right.
I don't know why, but if I'm having to think about it, it's not this big shadow. It's just a shadow.
It's a shadow. If you make the shadow bigger, what does that do to you? How do you feel about that?
Oh, that's not good.
Makes it worse?
Yeah.
Okay. So it is a manageably small shadow. So what happens if you make the shadow smaller?
Well, then it becomes a lot harder to even fathom, basically. It's too complex for you. Because it's smaller.
And because it's less anxious, or more, or harder to understand, or what?
Less anxious when it's smaller. I can control. Well, okay, that's a different story.
Control better. No, that's good. That's what I want to hear. So, okay, so an even more fundamental lesson is, if you have some kind of feeling about something, there's always a thought about it, and you can always change. You have control over how you see it. So, for example, now it doesn't have to be a shadow behind you. Do you have a performance in the future?
Actually, yeah, I have one in a couple weeks. Yeah.
Okay. So how would you like to think about it? Not a shadow, right?
Right.
Okay. So from now on, performances are not shadows.
Okay.
You see, that's not happening to you. That's something that for whatever reason you were doing, right? And that's great, because that means you can change it. So from now on, performances are not shadows.
Okay.
It's not really a shadow. It's just that's what you were representing it as in your head. So it's not a shadow anymore. So what is it going to be? Let's explore that a little bit. What would you like for the performance to be? Maybe so think of something that you already feel the way you want to feel about the performance. What's something you're already comfortable with? Like something coming up that you're already comfortable that you can handle.
Like a noun. Are you talking about describing a person?
Yeah, like going to work tomorrow, or an event you have coming up, or
sure, an event I have coming up. Like, how about walking the dogs, taking them to class?
Great. Okay, walking the dogs. So
nice.
Taking the dogs to class. That's a good one, because Anjali gets to come to us to advanced class this week.
That's going to be fun.
That's going to be a lot of fun. So, all right. So you've got class coming up. Where is that on your timeline?
The timeline.
Point to it.
Oh, well, now it's here. I mean, it's here.
In the present?
No, that's the future.
Oh, it's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's a little different than before. So it's in the future and it's in front of you. What about the graduation from this class? Where is that?
Oh, it's
the graduation that we're going to have in the future.
That's further in the future, so it's that way. Maybe I'm a little complex.
Is that where you're seeing it?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. When did we?
Is that too confusing?
When did we start? When did we start class? Like, where's that day? The first day.
Well, that's in the past. I didn't even
right,
go
it's in
to
the past.
class.
It's
I
in the
didn't go to
past.
class, so
That's
it's hard
okay. That's
to.
okay. So, well, when I came home from class, where is that located? It's over. You see it over here in the past. Wow, your timeline is reversed. You now are seeing the past on the right side.
I guess I'm a complex individual.
You are a complex.
Okay,
individual.
what do you expect me to say?
Okay, so I expected it to be like over here on the right.
Oh, interesting.
But because on the right is usually near future.
Huh.
And then over all the way on the right
well,
is far future.
That was
No. This is much more interesting. No.
This is my. You said you asked me this question, and I'm like, just
right. No. What you said is much more interesting. So okay, so think of the thing 5 years ago. Where's that located?
The thing 5 years ago in the past.
The first thing. Okay, it's over here. All right, and a plan for 5 years in the future. Where's that?
Boy. I guess I shouldn't think about it. My instinct was to point that way.
That's okay. That's probably where it is.
Was to point that way.
And it might have switched since then. You'll probably think about it over the next week or so, and you'll be like,
I should have reversed them because I'm right-handed. So this should be the future, and that should be the past. But that's the past.
Well, that's the other thing. We can change it if we want to, but right at the second, I'm more interested in how you currently do it.
Okay. That's how I currently do it.
All right. So, okay. So the dog class is like over here now, a little bit on the left.
The class I'm going to attend.
You're going to attend
is that way.
Is a little bit on the left.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. So I want you to see the size of it. How big is it? Show me with your hands how big it is. It's about that big, and show me where it is too, with your hands. So it's like over there a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now what I want you to do is hold it there, and suddenly it's the concert coming up.
Oh, okay.
How do you feel about that?
That's great.
You like it?
Yeah.
You did that.
No.
See, the concert does not control you. The thing does not control you. The thing in the outside world does not control you. You control you. You just have to know how to do it. Okay. So yes. All right. So that's from now on, all your concerts are just like that.
Ooh, that might make my life a whole lot easier.
Yes, it will. Okay. So every single feeling you have, everything you have, whether it's unconscious or not, and it's usually unconscious, you have control over if you do that. If you do it right, like what we're talking about. Okay, good. So that's number one. So what did? We took something we were already comfortable with, and we just replaced it with the content from the thing that we want to make comfortable. Okay, so let's see. Time is just flying by.
It does that.
It does that. All right, one more thing I want to do with you. All right, so you've got and you can actually change your timeline, your whole timeline by default, like how you default think about time. So, okay, all right, so you've got your future out there, and you've got your past out here. Okay, so I want to get an idea of how you feel about that. Okay, how easy it is to process and so on. All right, now just to experiment, see the future. We're going to flip it around. So now the future is over here and the past is over here. Okay, how does that feel? Better, worse, the same?
It feels, well, because I was getting used to the idea. It feels it's going to take some getting used to. Maybe a minute or so.
And okay. And it's not necessarily more useful to think about the future on the right in the way that some people have kind of distorted timelines where the future goes around like that, or it like hooks and goes around the back of their head and stuff like that. It sounds kind of funny, but that's really how they process time, and they're just as confused as it sounds. So it's very useful in that case to straighten it out and give them a more standard timeline. So we're going to go over fixing the timeline. We're going to go over 2 techniques for using your timeline, and that's going to be all the time we have for today. So let's do okay, so we've got the right and the left. You can keep the old way if you want to. I cannot immediately see an advantage to doing it left to right or right to left. So just kind of decide which way you want it. The important thing is you just decide that's the way you want it, and that's what will happen.
Okay.
Maybe practice a little bit, but it's really just a decision to make. Okay, so let's see. First technique I want to show you is if you ever find that you are, let's just say that you're getting overwhelmed because you're thinking about too much stuff in the future. Okay, so all the events you've got in the future. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. See your timeline, and we'll just say your future's out that way for now. Okay, and so you've got, and you want to limit how much your unconscious, how much of the future your unconscious thinks about at one time, so you don't get overwhelmed. You can't just tell your unconscious that, because your unconscious doesn't use words; it uses images and sounds and things like that. So what I want you to do is identify the amount of time on your timeline that you want to focus on. If you just want to focus on the next week or the next 2 weeks, so how much time in the future do you want to focus on? It could be a day, it could be an hour, it could be a month.
Yeah, wow, a month would be good.
A month?
That's where I am.
Okay. So see your timeline. Where does the month start on your timeline? Okay, and where does the month end on your timeline? Great. Okay, so I want you to see that time. Show me with your hands how wide it is. It's about that wide. Okay, now I want you to make all of that, and that's a month into the future. Okay, so I want you to make all of that comfortably bright and easy to read, and all the rest of it dim. Okay, see that? Now you see how your unconscious naturally focuses on that? It's just like a spotlight in a play. The purpose of the spotlight is so everyone knows where to look. Otherwise, they might look anywhere. So that's what you're doing for your mind. You're creating a spotlight, so that your brain knows just to focus on the month. And then it naturally doesn't wander. If your brain ever wanders, you can use the spotlight technique to keep your mind in one place.
Spotlight technique. Okay.
It's just a way of communicating to your unconscious. Your unconscious is more than happy to do whatever you want. It loves you and wants the same things you do. You just have to communicate it correctly. It's like a dog. You have to communicate correctly, and then it'll understand, and it wants to do it. So spotlight technique. Okay, and let's see. One other technique is, we went over this a little bit earlier, but I want to go over it in a little more detail. I call it the sliding door technique. So the spotlight technique was for when you want to focus on a certain amount of time. The sliding door technique is when you want to take an amount of time and look at it more carefully. So, for example, like, what did you do yesterday? Is a common question that they might ask. And if you leave yesterday in the past and the same size, it might be difficult to remember. Now, so what you can do is you could take yesterday and expand it out to right in front of you. So it slides across like a sliding door, gets right in front of you, and you've got from morning to night, and you can look at it more easily. So why don't you do that? So think to where is yesterday? Where was yesterday on the timeline? Just show me with one of your hands.
Yesterday. Gosh, why do I want to point to the left? It's not, I'm past. It's past, present.
You'll work through it.
I'm getting confused.
You'll work through it. You actually have been unconsciously pointing the left as past. I think maybe. Anyway, so wherever it happens to show up right now, your unconscious is still figuring out exactly where it wants it. Tell you what we'll do is we'll fix it into a certain place. We'll decide and we'll fix it. Okay. So first, yesterday is right here. Okay. I'll take it and spread it out. So you've got morning to night. Okay. So do you remember what you did yesterday now?
Yes.
What did you do? Just give me a kind of a rundown.
Worked out.
You did work out. That was good. Yeah. And what else did you?
Goodness gracious! Now I'm on the spot, so I can't remember.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Did you go to work?
Of course. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got up to work.
Went to work. I'm so sorry.
Did you take the dogs?
I took Tannis
to the vet.
Yesterday. Yes, took her to the vet. I thought that was Monday. Oh goodness.
Okay. I put her on the spot. Sorry. I put her on the spot. I'm sorry. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
A little frazzled right now. Okay, so.
No, I'm just thinking about a lot now.
No, I know. It's okay. All right, so one more thing. All right, so for the future, do you want the future to be on the right or the left? We can change it if you want to, but for now, we're going to decide.
The future?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, good. So future's on the right, and just fill that in with all the future things. past on the left. So you could see from when you were a kid all the way up to the present. And then what you're going to do tomorrow, next month, future plans, future plans, future plans, future plans. Okay, so from now on, future's on the right. It's just like a regular timeline in a social studies book.
Okay.
It's just like when they say timeline in school, the past is on the left and the future's on the right. We read left to right, and that's how time goes. So that's usually the easiest one to stick with.
Okay.
Okay, that is exactly how much time we have for this week. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week on Hypnosis Chat.